Okay, so I've unmuted myself, and I want to talk about competitive firms today. But before we get started with that, I just want to ask you guys, and again, in order for you to ask questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand. But I don't know if you guys have any general questions for me about anything, but we can get started with that. And if for whatever reason you don't have a mic, you could type your questions in the chat, and that would be okay too. So let's try this one more time. Go ahead and click on the participant and raise your hand just so I know you're there. Okay. So it looks like everybody pretty much can raise their hand. Thank you. And then you could put your hand on. So do you guys have any general questions? A lot of people, I don't know if you guys have been keeping up and if you've been reading the things that I've been posting on Blackboard, but you know, obviously, if we're going to do a midterm or something like that, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. It looks like we probably won't get back to campus. You know, I was hoping that at least as we got around to finals, campus would be open, and then at least we'd be able to give you one regular exam. And if we can't do that, then we're probably going to be looking at Ignithium. And it's like I told you guys before, if I had to do this on Ignithium, what I would do is go ahead and download all of your homework answers and then just open it up again for some subset of those, you know, and let you guys complete them again, and then that would be like a quiz slash a test. So, but do you guys have any questions? Last chance. No question. Okay. Well, if you do have a question at some point in time, then just go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll recognize you. So, you guys can see my screen, and this is the homework that we're going to have coming due for this week, which is on competition. And so we have a lot of cost curves here, and that's really what we want to get to. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll look at this PowerPoint presentation. So everybody should be able to see the PowerPoint presentation. And we should be able to get through this pretty quickly. There's also, and I'll put in the announcements later, you know, like I do normally, saying I'm going to assign this homework for this coming week, and there are these lectures that you can review on Thursday. So if we don't get all the way through these things, then there's some additional lectures on this material that are available on Ignithium, and you guys can go ahead and view that stuff. And okay. Okay. So, so when we're talking about firms in a competitive market, this is where we first talk about, you know, what firms are doing, and they're trying to maximize their profits. And you know, in economics, the gist of it is that if you try to think about what's a competitive market and what's not a competitive market, there are lots of things that really aren't competitive. And so, you know, that's one of the big issues that we have to deal with in economics is, well, how do things differ from being competitive? So there are a couple of things that economists look for to see whether or not markets actually seem competitive. Oh, and by the way, I should tell you guys that I'm recording this lecture, and you know, my intent is to distribute it. So I have to say that's my intent, because you know, it's assuming that everything works out the way that we hope to, and this is a different sort of bridge technology. So we'll see how things go. Anyway, so what economists look for is whether or not there are a lot of buyers and sellers in a market. That's one indication that a market's relatively competitive. To contrast that with one of the topics we'll be talking about next, which is monopoly. In monopoly, there's just one seller. And so you can probably see if there's just one seller of a product, there's probably some reason that being the single seller would give them an advantage, and that there might be implications for how the economy operates if there's just one seller in a market. So the other thing is not that there are just lots of buyers and sellers in the market, but that the goods that they're actually selling are very similar to one another. And then the last really key issue, the one that does most of the work, and the one that I think is kind of mysterious to people who were first introduced to this material, is that, and this is key, is that firms can freely enter and exit a market. That takes a little while to kind of absorb. But to contrast that, in the case of monopoly and other forms of industry and production, a lot of times we talk about barriers to entry. And so maybe that's a little bit easier to conceptualize, is if there's a reason why it's difficult to get into a business. But if you think about something, really simple, and I don't know if anybody besides me, and even if you haven't done it, you've probably seen other people do it. You have a lemon tree on your property, and so you get a whole bunch of lemons all at once, and you can't use them all, so you grab a lot of them off the tree, and you send your kids out front, and they sell lemons, and suddenly you're a lemon seller. So there are some markets, particularly agricultural markets, if you grow things in your home garden, that you can get into that market and sell them pretty easily. So those are situations where we say there are low barriers to entry, or in the extreme that it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to get a special license. You just begin producing the thing, and you can sell it right away. So if markets have free entry, and the free exit part is it's easy to get out of that kind of market. If you don't want to sell, you don't have to. There are other kinds of markets where it's really difficult to get in, and it's really hard to get out. And the best example I can give you guys is nuclear power production. So in nuclear power, I don't know if you guys know, it's nuclear power. They're producing electricity, and if you want to, even if you have the money to do it, because they're really expensive, but if you have the money to do it and you decide you want to open a nuclear power plant, then the regulatory process for opening something like that, it's about a decade to get the licenses and to get everything to be able to actually produce electric power with nuclear energy. And then if you want to get out of the nuclear power industry, it's really hard to shut down a nuclear power plant. Again, it's something else that takes many, many years to do. So there's not free entry and free exit into the nuclear power industry. So as a result of these characteristics, there are a couple of things that emerge in competitive markets. The main one is that no single buyer or seller has any real impact on the market price. And so the key language there is that we say that buyers and sellers in a competitive market are price takers, or they take the market price as given. So if I decide to become a seller of lemons in my neighborhood, I might try to sell them for 50 cents a piece or something like that. But if it turns out down at the grocery store people can get lemons for 25 cents a piece, then I'm probably not going to sell that many lemons. I have to really look out there and say, well, what are lemons selling for? And that's the price that I could expect to get for mine. I won't be able to normally have much control over the price. And that goes for buyers and sellers. So competitive markets have many buyers and sellers, and they're trading nearly identical products. And so we call them, again, price takers. They have to accept the prices determined by the market. Now, um, we're going to say, as I had mentioned before, that all firms in economics are assumed to have this objective of maximizing their profits. And so there are going to be these two pieces to their profit. One of them is going to be their revenue, or the amount of money that they make from selling the good. And that's simply the price of the product times the quantity that the firms sell. So total revenue is going to be proportional to the amount of output that they sell, meaning that as Q goes up, you just multiply Q times P, and that's going to give you your total revenue. And we also talk about average revenue in this case, and average revenue is just going to be the amount of money you get on average for each unit you sell. And so if you take total revenue and you divide it by the quantity that you sell, then you end up seeing that price times quantity divided by quantity just gives you price. So that's one of the concepts that becomes important in terms of determining how much a firm is going to decide to sell. And that's really our question. A lot of these questions are, okay, I know the firms are trying to maximize profits, and I know it's a competitive market, so I know they're price takers. So from that information, can I determine how much output the firm will decide to produce? And ultimately, remember, as economists, this is the kind of question we're interested in. We're trying to study the scientific allocation of resources. Can we figure out how much stuff is going to be produced if this market is competitive, or if it's a monopoly market, or if it's some other kind of market? So in the case of competition, we use those facts to figure out what's going to be the profit maximizing quantity for the firm to produce. And average revenue is going to be one of the clues that we use. But the main one is the one that you see right here, which is marginal revenue. So marginal revenue is how much money the firm is going to make from selling one more unit. And in competition, that ends up becoming a really easy question to answer, because if you know that the firm is just going to get whatever the market price is for their product, then for every unit they sell, on average, they're going to get the market price, but also on the margin for each additional unit, they're going to get the market price. But you're going to find out pretty soon that for monopoly and other forms of industrial organization, so other ways of organizing industries, that marginal revenue is not equal to the price of the product. So that's going to come again when we talk about monopoly and these other things that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So marginal revenue, technically, the definition is, remember, the triangle there is a capital Greek letter delta, which means change in. So it's the change in total revenue over the change in output. And so for competitive firms, marginal revenue is going to be equal to just the price of the good. So here's a little example of a table, and you can see the quantity and the price in the first two columns, and then we can calculate total revenue, average revenue, and marginal revenue. So if the firm's selling one unit and the market price is $6, then their total revenue from selling one unit is just going to be 1 times 6, which is 6. And then the average revenue, dividing that by Q, and the Q is 1, is going to give you 6. And technically, for that first unit, you're changing from 0 to 1 unit, so it would be $6 for that first unit. But you see how it ends up on our table as being offset, and a lot of textbooks do this. So the presentation that I'm using does it too. which just shows that as you're moving from one unit to another unit, that's how much additional revenue you get. So rather than moving from 0 to 1, it's easy to see it when you're moving from 1 to 2. You're going to pick up $6 more worth of revenue as you go to the second unit, and then you can see your when you get to 2 units, 2 times 6 is 12. So your total revenue has gone from 6 to 12. So that's the reason why you see this offset for the marginal revenue column. But if you were to go through this whole table, you'd see what we just talked about when we had discussed the equations, which is that the additional revenue or the marginal revenue for each unit is just going to be the market price. It's going to be 6. And you'll see these same types of tables in the coming weeks as we go through the other forms of market organization, and you'll see that they don't look like this. They're not quite so simple. So so now we'll go ahead and return back to this idea. Well, that our organizing principle, the main idea that we're talking about, is that firms are all trying to maximize profit. So now we know generally what a competitive industry or a competitive firm in an industry looks like. Let's see, if we can flesh out those details a little bit more. So here, you can see a table that's a little bit more complete. We have the marginal revenue, but now we're adding some additional columns. One is the total cost. And if we know the total cost, profit's going to be the difference between the total revenue and the total cost. So you can see, for example, I'll say at 3 units, the firm's going to sell those for $6 a piece and get $18. The total cost is $12, so the profit is also $6. At 4 units, the total revenue is $24, the total cost is $17, and the difference between the two is the firm's going to make $7 worth of profit. So notice that we're also adding the marginal revenue and the marginal cost columns.
I rinsed them, but I'm gonna wash them in a second.
And okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you guys have your mic on, please mute it because I'm getting a little bit of feedback in my headphones from that.
Hey, where are you in here?
Okay.
So mean.
Okay. Okay. So so the idea here is you can look, remember, marginal revenue is the amount of money the firm is making on that unit, and the marginal cost is the cost of that unit. So you can look at the first unit, for example, and say, well, the firm's going to bring in $6, and they're only going to have a cost of $2. So you can see they're going to net a profit of $4 on that unit. So obviously, they would go ahead and produce that unit. And if you do that comparison, you can say, oh, well, the firm is going to make some additional profit. And we don't talk about marginal profit explicitly, but it's here in the change in profit column. This is marginal profit or the additional profit. And you get all the way down to the point where the firm would continue to make additional money, right, an additional profit until the marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue. And you can see that's going to be true up until the 5th unit. So the firm would make a total of 5 units because that's where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And one thing that kind of confuses some students is you'll notice that there the change in profit is 0, right? And if you actually look at the total profit, you'll see the total profit is the same, for unit 4 and for unit 5. Now, you know, it's a reasonable question, and like anybody could ask this, and unless I was sitting here, you probably wouldn't figure out the answer on your own, which is, and I'll ask you guys a question here, and I'll go ahead and let's see if I can tap it in. I'll type it in the chat. So, and so Charmaine, your additional question, let's handle those questions like towards the end. So in 10 or 15 minutes, I'll ask for general questions. But I have a question for you guys. So why would the firm produce 5 units instead of 4 if they both, as in this example, give a profit of $7 is our total profit? That's the question. And if you'd like to help answer the question, just go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. So we'll do the same thing that we normally do. I will sing my song. You guys remember the song, right? So, but I'm going to sing the other one. If you don't know the answer, raise your hand. If you don't know the answer, raise your hand. If you really don't know it and you need some help to show it, if you don't know the answer, raise your hand. Okay. Oh, well, you got to keep your hands up. If you don't know the answer, raise your hand and keep it up. Because that means otherwise I can ask you. Okay. So Tiffany is the only one that I can see that didn't raise her hand. Oh, and well, okay, Melody raised her hand. Levgeny didn't raise a hand. Megan didn't raise a hand. Okay, so we'll ask Tiffany. Tiffany. And notice how I asked the question, what do you think? Okay, and then we're getting nothing. What about Cosette? You don't have your hand up. Oh, you do have your hand up. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's see. Let's ask Levgeny. Jenny. Okay. Well, then how come you didn't? Do you have a mic, Levgeny? No mic. Okay. Let's ask Megan. Okay. Oh, okay. So yeah, so Megan and everybody else, if so, and what about you, Charmaine?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so well,
Can you speak up a little bit?
okay. How about now?
Yes, a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay, so I think you're trying to just maximize your production. So even if you're generating the same profit, you might as well make a bit more, just in case you could make a profit off of that extra unit.
Okay, it's a great answer. It's wrong, but it's
Okay.
totally a great answer.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you a little clap for that one. That's everybody should give a clap to Charmaine. So the logic that you just employed is the one that a lot of people do. It's what I call the hand waving. Because I mean, this is supposed to be about rules. Do you follow me, Charmaine? Unmute yourself because I want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a rule, right? And the rule is I'm gonna unmute you again because I want to have a conversation about this. As long as you don't have, I can hear okay with my headphones on. Yeah. So see the deal is there's a rule that profits are maximized when marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Okay. And that's true. And it'll always be true, right? But notice the way that the rule is stated. Marginal revenue, when it's equal to marginal cost, that level of production will maximize profits. But there are two things that are missing. One is that it doesn't say that it's the unique profit maximum. So I'll tell you, one issue is that economists have noted that it is possible for there to be other levels of production that do maximize profits. The problem is that you can't identify those with a rule, meaning that it could be, in our case, right, we said the fifth unit is where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And it turns out that the fourth unit gives us the same level of profit, which is 7. But depending upon what's going on with the costs of the firm and the particular situation we're talking about, it could be the third unit or even the second unit gives us the same level of profit. So like, whoa, like, so you don't have a rule to follow. So marginal revenue equals marginal cost will always find a profit maximum for us, even though not necessarily the profit maximum. That's one issue. The other one has to do with the definition of zero profit. Okay. So it's kind of like what you were talking about, but you kind of, misstated things a little bit. A lot of times people talk about market share. They say, well, and it was kind of like what you were talking about when you said, well, they might produce that extra unit just on the off chance that they could make some profit. But, that kind of explanation seems to suggest something like, well, they don't really know what their profit is, and maybe they're being speculative and all the rest of it. And, that's really not allowed here. We don't have any reason to suppose there's uncertainty, even though in reality it might exist. So, because there's we have no uncertainty here. The firm knows its costs. It knows the price of the product. It knows its market. It's just, we'd be adding something in that just wasn't in the model. But a lot of people say, well, by serving extra customers, maybe sometime in the future, those customers will come back to them and they can make a little profit off them. And they say things like that. But that's another kind of one of those hand waving, explanations. But the truth is that zero profit, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but it's zero economic profit. So I don't know if you had a chance to review the videos that I had last time, but there's this big difference between accounting profit and economic profit. So accounting profit is just the cash flows of the firm, but economic profit also accounts for the opportunity costs of the firm. And where that normally comes up is that every business has the opportunity to just shut down, sell all of its assets, and put that money in the stock market. And the stock market gives you a standard accounting rate of return, which is about 7% per year on average. So if you're not making at least an accounting profit, remember the accounting profit is always greater than the economic profit, and it means you're not making a normal rate of return on your investment. So to kind of bring it home, and I'll just say it, and if it takes a little while for you to think about it, that's fine, because it's a subtle point. But as the firm increases output from 4 units to 5 units, it's not changing its economic profit at all, but it's still making a accounting profit. It's covering its opportunity costs, which means that if the firm was to say stop at 4 units, what would they avoid doing? Well, one of the things that they would avoid is they would avoid this additional cost of 6, and this is all in dollars. So this additional $6 marginal cost of producing an extra unit. But what could they do with that? Well, they could invest it in the stock market and earn a normal rate of return, which from an economic perspective would be part of their opportunity cost. So the real answer is, or probably the better answer is, they go ahead and produce this last unit, even though it doesn't bring them any additional economic profit, because it doesn't hurt them either. And they couldn't do anything better with that money. It's not like they could, avoid that additional cost and not sell that additional unit and take that additional money that they're spending in terms of costs and invest it in the stock market and do any better. So yeah, I mean, they do it because they're earning a normal accounting rate of return too. So the two issues are, one, as economists, we want a rule that we can follow to find the maximum profit for the firm. And the only rule that's stable and consistent is marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost at a profit maximum. And the second reason is that earning zero profit is normal. It's okay. And in fact, later on, we're going to find out that firms in the long run are going to earn zero profit. So anyway, I hope that helps answer the question a little bit. But it's something worth thinking about. Does it make sense, Charmaine?
So would that mean they raise their implicit value?
Well, when you say implicit value, that's a term I'm not familiar with. So I'm not sure where did you hear that implicit?
It was from the video lecture week 8, the second lecture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so probably what I was talking about was implicit and explicit costs, and so so opportunity cost covers both explicit costs and implicit costs. So explicit costs are the costs that are accounting costs; they have receipts, and implicit costs are costs that you incur that you don't have receipts for. So, for example, if you could be investing your money in the stock market and earning 7% return, and you don't do that, you just leave your money in a savings account and earn close to zero, then that's an opportunity cost. It's an implicit cost of choosing behavior that is foregoing something that could be beneficial, could bring you additional income. So anyway, does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay, so anyway, marginal cost equals marginal revenue is going to identify the profit maximum for the firm. That's our main lesson. Okay, so we can also graph that, and this is what's going to help you guys for doing the problems on Ignithium. And so you can see here you have the firm's price that the market's setting for them. And a lot of times we interpret this as actually being the firm's demand curve, not the market level demand curve. And actually, I'm going to skip forward in the presentation, and then I'll come back to that because I want to show you guys this graph at the end. And so notice this is the market supply curve and the individual firm supply curve. And let's see. Yeah. So now you can see, I think this is one of the best graphs to show you, is this one. You can see that what's going on is this is our regular demand and supply. We've normally been graphing market demand and supply. And then you see here's the market price P1. And since the firm can sell as much or as little as it wants at P1, this becomes the firm's demand curve. So we have a firm demand curve, which is that horizontal line that's perfectly elastic. And you've got this downward sloping demand curve at the market level. So that's really where we're going. So I'll go back to where we were. So this is the firm's demand curve, and the marginal cost curve is their supply curve, right? And so where demand equals supply for the firm is this Q max, the profit maximizing quantity, right? But there's a lot going on in this graph, but I want to point out that the price the firm receives over here, the P, right, is equal to the marginal cost. So for the firm where demand and supply intersect, also obeys that rule that we just came up with, which is price is equal to marginal cost. And that gives you the level of output for the firm, the Q max down here. Okay. So, what are the other details that we're going to talk about? Well, the main issue is we want to make sure that you guys understand that the marginal cost curve for the firm is its supply curve, but that's not absolutely true. What's really true, and I'll give you the rule right now, is it's only that segment of the marginal cost curve that's above the average variable cost curve. So we have an average total cost curve here and an average variable cost curve, and you guys have seen those already. But it's only the portion of the marginal cost curve that's actually above the average variable cost curve that's the firm supply curve. And what we'll be finding out in just a moment is the segment that's below the average variable cost curve if the firm was to produce down here, if price dropped all the way, if it was to produce at this segment of the marginal cost curve below the minimum of the average variable cost curve, then the firm would actually be losing money, and losing much more money by staying in operation than it would lose if it just shut down. Because remember, if the firm just shuts down and produces zero, then the firm would only lose its fixed cost. And to be clear, let's just identify the fixed costs with one thing. Let's say the firm rents a building and it has a lease. So if the firm shuts down, it still has to make its lease payment. And so it's going to lose that fixed cost. But it won't lose costs on the units it might if it continued to produce. And what's going on at the bottom part of the marginal cost curve here is the firm's costs of production for each unit are actually higher than the price the product's selling for in the market. So if the firm produces at the bottom part of the marginal cost curve, it's actually, and this is a non-economic expression, but one you guys will be familiar with, the firm would be throwing good money after bad, right? It would be actually losing money on each and every unit it produced. And it couldn't possibly be maximizing profit to do that way if it did that. So anyway, so what do we end up with? Well, we saw on the table and on the graph that the firm is going to maximize profits when marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And if the firm is at a place where marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, and this arrow is the wrong direction, it should be, pay attention to the words, not the arrows. It should increase the quantity. And if the marginal revenue is less than marginal cost, then it should decrease its quantity of output. And if marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, then profit is maximized. So these are the three general rules of how the firm should behave. So we can look back here and we can see, like at Q2, for example. So the marginal cost is greater than the firm's marginal revenue as represented by this red horizontal line that we call the firm's demand curve. So here, the cost is greater than the amount the firm would receive. So the firm should move back towards Qmax. It should reduce its quantity. But at Q1, the marginal revenue is greater than the marginal cost for Q1. So the firm's making profit on that unit, and that means it should increase its quantity of output. Okay. So, so the marginal cost as the firm's supply curve. So this actually doesn't go down far enough. I told you guys we should go all the way down to the minimum of the average variable cost curve. So this slide should be modified. But the section of the marginal cost curve is also the supply curve, but it should go all the way down to the minimum of the average variable cost curve. So it should extend down here, not just the area above the average total cost. So the thing we've been talking about is that sometimes businesses will choose to shut down. And shutting down is a short-run decision to not produce anything during a specific period because of current market conditions. That's as contrasted with exit, which is a long-run decision to completely get out of business. So actually, this is the first time in my life that I've seen businesses doing this widely. So I'll ask you guys the question, have you seen any businesses shut down recently? That's my chat question. If you have, and you'd like to talk about it, go ahead and raise your hand. So you want to raise your hand and talk about it? Anybody? And I actually, so Chris wants to talk. I'm going to get to you just a second, Chris. Charmaine, I actually want to talk to you first. So you want to unmute yourself? Charmaine?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay. So
Okay.
tell us about your spa.
So I work as a massage therapist, and I work in massage envy. And obviously, during the circumstances, we can't continue our job. So we're temporarily shut down. The owner hasn't given us a specific date, but the California Massage Therapy um, Council regularly gives us emails and let us know that um, everyone who holds a license currently cannot do work right now.
Okay.
So our
So
license, yeah.
so this is my question. Bring it back to econ a little bit. So on an average week, what's the quantity of massages that you produce?
If I'm working part time, I would have at least 5 clients in one day, so about 20
Okay.
clients
So
in a week.
yeah, so you normally produce a queue of 20, and now what's your quantity?
0.
Yeah, so now your queue is 0. So that's what we're talking about. Shut down is for a specific period of time, you produce a queue of 0. But you're not getting out of the massage therapy business altogether, right? You're not like, I don't know about you as an individual massage therapist, but you're not like selling all the massage therapy tables. You're not, um, you know, getting out of the rent or the lease, right? You're keeping the business and the sign, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were actually like going out of business permanently, that would be what we would call in economics an exit decision. But you've shut down, you're temporarily producing 0, and you're doing that because there's no point in having you go to work if there's nobody to massage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so temporarily the market for massages is demand of 0, so you just don't do it for a while. But there are lots of places right now that are doing that. The one other thing I that interested me that you talked about is Sears. So what do you think about Sears? Do you think that they're shutting down, or do you think they're exiting?
Exiting.
I think they're exiting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Charmaine would probably agree. You agree, Charmaine?
Yeah, they're exiting. They're selling a lot of their inventory and even some of their I guess
Stores.
their stores.
Yeah, they're getting out of business. So yeah, Chris, I agree. And so now we'll go down to Chris and tell me a little bit about what you've seen going on, Chris.
So at first I saw it as a shutdown because they were doing it for a couple years. So it wasn't just we're going to exit, but they start getting rid of some of their brands. For example, their craftsmanship brands, their tools and things of that nature.
Right.
And that's what was holding them up, I believe. So they're exiting because of the way we have a lot of people are not going to the big box stores anymore, such as Sears, which is one of the older stores. Yet they're able to buy all this stuff online. And I don't think Sears will be able to compete online compared to Amazon, Target, Walmart, and places like that.
Yeah, so yeah, it looks a lot more like Sears is exiting because they're actually getting rid of stores and stuff like that. And I don't know if you've seen any businesses like that that have just gone out of business altogether, but I think you're right. I mean, for sure Sears would be exiting if they sold everything, like you were saying, they get rid of Craftsman and they just close down all of their stores. They're out for good. right? And even if they change it to like a no online business model, but they completely they're done. But I was going to ask you, Chris, did you have another comment? You seen any other places that recently have changed?
Um, Not that I can say that just recently. Well, other than Toys R Us.
Okay, so Toys R Us, you're right. They exited, right? There's
Yeah,
no more Toys R Us.
yeah, but I haven't really seen anything else other than that recently.
Yeah, well, you know what I've been seeing in my neighborhood, which I thought somebody was going to bring up, but a lot of restaurants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like Sizzler right now, and all of the places where you would normally go down and go in and sit down, they're completely closed. But that's a shutdown decision. They're not going out of business. They're just temporarily having zero customers. And like the movie theaters right now, right? That's shut down. They temporarily produce zero. But, at the AMC near my house, they still have their buildings and they still, have their signs up and everything. So
would that be the same as such as we're seeing like NBA, they're shutting down all the stadiums and all the games for right now?
yeah, so that's a temporary decision to produce zero basketball games, but they're not going out of business.
Right.
So the only reason why I wanted to bring it up is to make sure you guys understand that sometimes businesses will shut down, produce zero, but it doesn't mean they're going out of business. Going out of business is exiting the industry. So let's talk about one more example, and Sean, do you wanna tell us about Foot Locker? I don't know if you might.
Yeah, so Foot Locker, we originally had it to where the stores will stay open and the stores will stay closed, but we open only for UPS so we can get the online orders out. But they ended up shutting that down just because the malls started closing. So we can't stay open if the mall's closed.
Right. So but Foot Locker's not. Would you say they're shutting down or exiting?
Just shutting down because you can
Right.
still buy stuff online, but not at physical locations.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's just decreasing their quantity. But remember, shutdown would be producing a quantity of zero. But like if you're saying they're not even doing online orders, like at least through some of their locations at the malls, those locations are shut down, but just temporarily, right?
Right.
So the idea is that temporarily producing a quantity of zero is shut down, and I think Cosette, you want to tell us about Skyzone? Is another good example.
Sure. Um, we stayed open for a while, and but then we're just temporarily shut down because there was a case like across the street from us of a kid who had
Oh,
corona.
wow.
So we kind of had to shut down because we just have like hundreds of kids coming in like every day.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Anywhere there's like a large gathering, like when this was all getting started, I used to take my girls, every once in a while we go down to Big Air, which is like Skyzone.
Yeah.
And every time I've ever been in there, there's like, thousands of, dirty little kids running around. And I thought to myself, because now that they shut down the schools, I was like, trying to think of activities for my girls. And I was like, no.
Yeah, like a
No.
lot of parents still came with their kids once coronavirus is happening. So like they tried to have someone on courts like sanitizing like every couple minutes everything, but that lasted like 2 days until we got shut down.
Yeah, and think about it. Like, how are you going to sanitize the little kids? That's like impossible.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like little kids, it was just like all the equipment every 5
Oh,
minutes.
yeah. No, but I'm just saying they're going to touch things all over the place.
Yeah.
And they're going to be,
Like we couldn't stop it if it was gonna be there anyways, no matter how much we sanitized it.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember about being a little kid or not, but but I remember I always had dirty nails, like till I was 12. My nails were just constantly dirty. So yeah. But Skyzone has shut down. They've not exited because they still
Yeah.
have all their equipment. They still have their buildings. They're just waiting, and
Yeah.
they'll start back up as soon as the market gets better. So hopefully you guys understand there's a difference. And so now we're going to talk about this difference in terms of how it affects firms' supply decisions. And so what happens is that, and actually I'm going to kind of skip the sunk cost stuff because that's less important. We want to really get to this rule. And it says that the firm should shut down whenever the total revenue is less than their variable cost. And if you think about it, it's the thing I was saying about yesterday. Your fixed costs you can't do anything about, but your variable costs are like, you know, your costs of the electricity for running the building, the maintenance costs. If you're talking about Skyzone, it's the staff and it's the people that are the janitors that clean up and all of those things. As you have people come in and use the facility, you need more staff. You need to do more maintenance on the equipment and things like that. So if you shut down and you don't have anybody going in, then the only cost you're going to have is the cost for renting the building and maybe your insurance payments and other things like that. So and I bet probably in the case of Skyzone, because I bet you that they have a huge insurance payment. If they don't have any customers, they probably are able to get their insurance payments cut. So anyway, there are these costs that vary with the quantity of output, and if you produce zero, you don't have to incur any of those costs. So if the amount of money you would make, which is your total revenue, ever drops below your variable costs of production, then you just want to shut down and you absorb your fixed costs, meaning you're going to still have those, but you're not going to actually be spending more money than you're bringing in. I mean, just imagine if Skyzone was to stay open and you know, fully staffed, and you know, I don't know, I mean, there would be some people who would still send their kids, but I bet you there are a lot of people who would just stay away, so there wouldn't be much business. And so the idea is that the cost of staffing and other things like that would actually be greater than the amount of money they would make from the customers because there's so few customers. And that's what's going on with lots of restaurants right now. You know, even if they were to allow people to come in and sit down, because of everything that's going on, people are being told to just stay home. So you can't keep a, you know, a fully staffed restaurant with all the cooks and everything like that standing around. Those are costs that are avoidable because if you send the people home, the staff home, then you don't have to pay them. And if you're paying a full staff to only serve a few customers, you're losing money by just staying open. So once we make this first observation, then the second one is this is just math. You can divide both sides of any inequality by the same number, divide it by Q, which is your quantity of output. And you end up with this rule, which is whenever the rule I told you about before, whenever price drops below, because remember total revenue divided by Q would give you back price. If price ever drops below average variable cost, then the business should shut down. So, and this is our graph that I was showing you before. So notice this segment of the marginal cost curve above the average variable cost curve, that's the firm's supply curve. And then once we hit the minimum of the AVC, it jumps over to the axis, which is a quantity of zero. So this kinked line is really the firm's supply curve. Okay, so as price goes up, starting at zero, at first they don't produce anything, and then all of a sudden, once price gets above the minimum of the average variable cost, then they produce where price is equal to marginal cost. Now, these other labels here are just telling you that the firm between the average total cost and the average variable cost is the firm's fixed costs. It's their average fixed costs. But what's happening in the beginning, the firm is producing. So once you get above average variable cost, the firm's producing, but they're still producing at a loss. The only issue is that they're able to cover some of their fixed costs. They can cover some of their rent by staying open. So in that case, the firm is maximizing their profits or minimizing their losses by staying open, because if their rent's $1,000 a month and they stay open and they can pay 500 of that through revenue from their customers, then they're only going to have a $500 loss. They'll cover part of their rent. But once price goes up above the minimum of the average total cost curve in this segment up here, then the firm's covering all of their costs and they're beginning to actually make some profit. So to recap, the firm's marginal cost curve is its supply curve, but only for that segment above the minimum of the average variable cost curve. Below that, the firm will shut down and produce zero. Okay, so I think this is a good place to stop. And the rest of this stuff you guys should be able to review on your own at the other videos that I have that I'll point you guys to that discuss this material, just because we're, over time. And I'll ask you guys, do you guys have any questions for me? Chris, you still have your hand up. I don't know, did you have something you wanted to say? Or any other question?
The assignment, the write-in assignment.
Okay. Yeah, so I will send you guys, well, actually you guys have the information and I'll show you again. So I'm gonna go back to Ignithium so you guys can all see this. You can see this, Chris?
Yeah.
So, so if I go to about this course, that's the link that I just clicked on. And then it has writing assignment details.
Right.
And then it tells you everything that you have to do. Now, the only thing that I haven't done for you guys yet is there's this Easy Research Workshop certificate. And I'll show you guys. I'm going to go to CPP library. And can you see this, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay, go to University Library. And then, let's see. They should have books and articles given to the library. Meet and study here. Oh, research tutorials. You see that link there?
Right. Okay.
Click on research tutorials, and then see where it says research tutorials 101. It should be under here. They changed the page since I was here last. So, okay. They did change it. Maybe they don't have it anymore. Eek. Oh, tutorials with assessment. Document links. Oh, here it is. Easy research tutorial.
Okay.
See that one?
Yeah.
You click on it. And then you fill out your name and stuff like that, and you do continue. And once you get to this page, you just go, and at the very end, once you finish it, it only take like 20 minutes.
Okay.
It just introduces you to the resources in the library. And then it'll put a screen up that says you completed it. And you can normally print that out, but obviously in this case, you should just take a screenshot. And at the very end, I probably will have you guys upload all of these things someplace where I can review them, or put it all together in one document and scan it and email it to me.
Okay.
But this tells you what you're supposed to do. It's a pretty simple assignment. It's just a 5-paragraph opinion essay on something that is about public policy that interests you. I'll tell you what would be a really good topic is like the newest economic stimulus package that they're doing. It kind of crosses over between micro and macro, but you could talk about the labor market, and we talked about minimum wages and that kind of stuff for labor markets, but you could try to figure out, now obviously this would be your paper, so you have to think about it, but you could try to think about how extending unemployment benefits or other things might affect the demand and supply of labor, and whether or not you think it's a good idea. And that's why I said it's an opinion essay. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And like I said, I intend to distribute this, and good luck to you guys. And I'll be in touch. If you guys have any other questions, go ahead and raise your hand, and if I don't see any hands, I'll exit. Okay. All right. Stay safe.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.